those who have lost loved ones. Our Heavenly Father, be with our men and women in foreign fields, foreign seas. Look over them and protect them. Our Heavenly Father, be with the leaders of our country through these troubling times. Give them the strength and the knowledge for the decisions they need to make. Our Heavenly Father, as we go about our everyday life, help us to cherish every moment that we're on this earth. Our Heavenly Father, forgive those who trespass against us, and forgive us for our many sins, and remember them no more. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
The church is one foundation, in Jesus Christ her Lord. She is His new creation, by water and the word. From heaven He came and sought her, to be His holy bride. With His own blood He bought her, and for her life He died. Elect from every nation, yet one o'er all the earth. Her charter of salvation, one Lord, one faith, one birth, one holy name she blesses, partakes one holy food, and to one hope she presses, with every grace endued. Though with a scornful wonder we see her sword oppressed, her doctrine rent asunder, by names and creeds distressed. Yet saints their watch are keeping, they cry, how long? And soon the night of weeping shall be the morn of song. Invitation song will be number 8. Number 8.
Good evening. Hope you're having a good week so far. Mine's been busy. It always is. But I'm glad to take a break, be able to come and be with you guys and spend a little while studying God's Word. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 15. We are on, we'll say the backside of the curse, the consequences of David's sin with Bathsheba. We found out who the problem child is going to be that's going to raise up so much trouble in David's household. Now, as if Amnon was not enough, we have Absalom, and we're really getting into the Absalom part of the narrative here. David is got several wives, quite a few concubines, but the children that the text is focused on, since his sin with Bathsheba, are the children that are causing grief in his household, focusing on the consequences of David's sin. So, we get into chapter 15. Absalom, chapter 14, he's plotted to kill his brother, Amnon. That has happened. He fled over to Geshur, where his grandfather, the king, lives and reigns. He was there for a couple of years. By the end of the chapter, however, Joab convinced David to bring him back, to allow him to come back. David allows him to come back to Jerusalem, to live in his own house, apart from the king, and he's not to come into David's presence. And that went on for a couple of years, and at the end of the chapter, Verse 33, Joab went to the king and told him, Absalom had summoned him. So he came to the king, bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. So this is a welcome back, a full reconciliation. Absalom is welcomed back in the presence of the king. He is free, if you will, to move about the kingdom. And so, well, chapter 15 picks up with this newfound acceptance and freedom in Jerusalem. So after this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right, but there's no man designated by the king to hear you." And then Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were judge in the land, then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." We see this is the beginning of Absalom's subversion. This is Absalom getting in to the kingdom, right? Raising favor, trying to sway people to think highly of him. First thing he did was get him a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. These could be his guard. He's a king's son. They're there perhaps for protection, but their job here is to be heralds. They're announcing Absalom's presence. They're going before the chariot. Absalom is making a big deal out of himself. He's doing this for show, for pomp. And that's exactly what's happening. So he's sitting by the gates. He's trying to gain favor. You know, he's one, disparaging his father. David evidently has not set up a really good system of hearing the disputes and judging Israel. And Absalom has taken advantage of that here in verse 3. And so he's just, he's getting in there, right? He's rooting himself in to the favor of the people, subverting David's authority, and he's just going to get worse. Verse 5, whenever men came near to pay homage to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. And Absalom did this to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. He didn't just shake their hand, he pulled them close. He was very relational. That's the point of the text. He's building friendships. He's building relations with the people, and he's growing his popularity in Israel. And this is how long this has gone on. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Please let me go and pay my vow, which I vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I lived in Geshur and Aram, saying, if the Lord will indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will offer worship to the Lord." The king said to him, "Go in peace." And so he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron." All right, so 4 years pass. Absalom is he's politicking in Jerusalem. Think about all the things that's happened in 4 years. Now, besides just daily business, you've got all the feasts. You've got the Feast of Booths coming around Pentecost. You have the Passover. You've got all of Israel coming into Jerusalem for these things, right? So Absalom is able to not only, the regulars, those who come in over 4 years just traveling, but then you got all these feast days that people migrate to Jerusalem. Absalom is able to build up quite a following. He's got quite a few folks now that he's able to sway, and so he's got him he's kind of got himself a pretty good following. And so he's got a plan. He's vowed this vow back in Geshur. He's going to go to Hebron. and make an offering. Now, what's so important about that is that Hebron was David's capital city before moving to Jerusalem. This is where David was anointed king, right? This is where he has brought the north, as it were, and the south together, Israel and Judah, the tribes together. Ishbosheth concedes, and he brings Ishbosheth in with him as well. So this is a symbolic gesture here. It is ceremonial. Absalom is going to have himself declared king by the Israelites at Hebron, just like Dad. He's going to make this as official as possible, without the blessing of course, the king or a prophet or anything like that we've seen so far. Still not on the up and up, but he's going through the motions. He's doing the things that's going to gain him favor and put him on the throne. Verse 9, the king said to him, "Go in peace." And so he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king." And so that's going to be the proclamation. This is going to be the official declaration. This is going to be the thing that sets Absalom on his way to Jerusalem. So with verse 11, Absalom went with 200 men from Jerusalem who were invited guests, and they went in their innocence. They knew nothing. They didn't know. They didn't know what Absalom had planned. Verse 12, and while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from the city of Gilo, and the conspiracy grew strong, and the people of Absalom kept increasing. One of the things that's significant about that is that this fella here, Ahithophel, is Bathsheba's dad. This is one of David's father-in-laws and a counselor, the king. And so that's pretty significant. He's reaching out and pulling in some of David's assets to himself here. So it's not just that he's gathered a few folks around him. He's got people close to the throne with him as well. The messenger came to David, saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom." And David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, "Arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword." The king's servant said to the king, "Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king decides." And so the king went out and all his household after him. And the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. And the king went out and all the people after him. And they halted at the last house. All his servants passed by him, and all the Kerethites, all the Pelethites, all 600 Gittites who had followed him from Gath passed on before the king. And then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why do you also go with us? Go back and stay with the king, for you're a foreigner and also an exile from your home. You came only yesterday, and shall I today make you wander about with us, since I go, I know not where? Go back and take your brothers with you, and may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you." But Ittai answered the king, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king shall be, whether for death or for life, there also will your servant be." David said to Ittai, "Go then, pass on." And then Ittai the Gittite passed on with all his men and all the little ones who were with him. Okay, so David has left. Wait, let me go ahead and read verse 23. I still got one more to go. All the land wept aloud as all the people passed by, and the king crossed the brook Kidron, and all the people passed on toward the wilderness. All right, get this picture here. This is David. You remember all those mighty men that trailed around with him, those hired mercenaries, let me back up because I'm going to say it wrong if I don't. The Kerethites, the Pelethites, the Gittites, all these mighty men of valor that were with David, his mighty warriors that they defeated Philistines, they defeated the armies of Saul, they've been successful in their military campaigns. All this thing has been great, right? and they're running out of Jerusalem. This doesn't sound like David, does it? It doesn't mesh up with what we've seen of David in the past. David is not mounting up a defense at Jerusalem. He's not gathering these mighty warriors up. He's not attempting to withstand Absalom at all right now. It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? He's not trying to keep the throne. And here's the other thing. Now he's got his mercenaries here. There's been no message sent to Joab, the general of Israel's army. He hasn't called for him. So we wonder what's going on. David, why are you willing to just walk away? It's bizarre. There's another aspect of something going on here as well. You remember throughout David's youth, while he's on the run from Saul, and after he's anointed king at Hebron, right up until the sin with Bathsheba and his rebuke of Nathan, David consulted God about every move he made, every step he took. He would call one of the priests, and he would ask God questions, and God would answer and tell him which way he should go, whether he should fight, whether he should run. Constantly, David was seeking God's counsel. Since that sin with Bathsheba, we haven't been seeing that out of David. David's been running afoul. David's family has been falling apart ever since, hasn't it? It has. Connection there? I think so. So we have the mighty warrior King David packing up and walking across the Kidron. He's walking a path that Jesus is going to walk a couple of centuries later. Crossing the Kidron Brook up to the Mount of Olives. Jesus would go to the Mount of Olives. Sometimes he'd just keep on going right over to Bethany and see Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Well, this is the path that David is on right now. Abiathar came up, and behold, Zadok came also with all the Levites, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. They set down the ark of God until the people had all passed out of the city. The king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see it, both it and his dwelling place. But if he says, I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him. The king also said to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your two sons, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. And see, I will wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. And so Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. A little bit of strategy here. We've got the history of the ark being with Israel. We got the king taking the ark, the priest bringing it out with David. May not be such a great idea. Historically speaking, Israel lost the last time they carried the ark into battle. Philistines got the ark back, caused great problems for the Philistines, and they sent it back to David. David's transporting the thing to Jerusalem, and one of his guys reaches out to steady it and drops dead. Maybe leaving the ark in Jerusalem, in the tent David has prepared. Things have been going all right. Maybe it's best to leave it there, and we'll let God choose whether he's going to bless and sustain me or not. Right? Send the priest back. Let them be faithful to God. And if maybe this is where David's at in his thinking, is if this curse is playing itself out, and this is the way my family is going to be split, and the way I'm going to be usurped out of the throne, it must be God's will. And perhaps that's why David is not fighting, that he is resolute or have decided that, if this is God's will for Absalom to take the throne, I'm not fighting against it. Maybe that's where David is. David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot, with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. And it was told David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. David said, O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. We've got a processional of mourning, right? It's as a funeral procession, heading up the Mount of Olives. That's the image we get. David finds out that one of his counselors, his father-in-law, is with Absalom. He's on Absalom's side. David's prayer is that he will not give wise counsel, that his counsel will be foolishness. And while David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him, and his coat torn and dirt on his head. David said to him, if you go on with me, you'll be a burden to me. We'll pause right there because we're not used to seeing these alternate worship sites and things like that. At this point in Israel's history, the temple is not built. The tent that David has built is technically not the tabernacle. It is a shelter for the ark of God, but they're still worship, so they're still high places. The author has mentioned that a few times as we went. I didn't draw a lot of attention to it then. But there are still worship sites, and they're typically on the tops of high places such as the Mount of Olives. And so what we have is Hushai here is going to be a form of priest, and perhaps he is a Levite. David is going to send him back to Jerusalem. Verse 34, you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I've been your father's servant in time past, so now I will be your servant. Then you'll defeat for me the counsel of Ahithophel. Are not Zadok and Abiathar the priest with you there? So whatever you hear from the king's house, tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. So now David is looking to have a spy. He's going to want Hushai to be a double agent, if you will. Got a little bit of espionage going on. David's got somebody on the inside, and he's got his two priests and their sons as well, so he can get information out of Jerusalem. Verse 36, behold, their two sons are with them there, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send to me everything you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city just as Absalom was entering Jerusalem. So now we have David is passing over the Mount of Olives. He's on his way to the fords of Jordan. That is at Jericho, the same fords that Joshua and the children of Israel passed over to come into the promised land. And David is leaving by the same route. Going to set up camp on the east side of the Jordan, and he's going to hold up right there until he hears word what's happening in Jerusalem. And so we have an approach that David is taking here. Right? We have this peaceful, I was going to say obsession. Right? He's leaving Jerusalem. He's leaving the throne and going away. And this accomplishes a couple things. One, Jerusalem is not going to be engaged in war, right? The inhabitants of Jerusalem, those that have left, presumably these that have gone with David are his closest servants, friends, warriors that he's been with for a long time. You still have the city of Jerusalem there. It still has Jebusites in it. It still has a lot of citizens there. A lot of folks from all over Israel still there. David is saving a battle. He's saving loss of life, destruction of the city, if a war should break out there. So Absalom is in effect just moving right into the throne. Unabated, if you will, straight in there. This is just the beginning of the Absalom narrative. Remember the curse. Out of your own household, one is going to rise up. Well, here he is. This is part of the curse, and that raises more questions. We use curse terminology. We could call it consequences. Right here in this particular history, you have David, who is still noted as Israel's greatest king, even above Solomon, who was the wealthiest, who brought more power and influence into the kingdom. But David is still the archetype king for him. He's still the most glorious king, the powerful king. And you have Solomon, the son that did so well, and yet, between the two of them, you can't point at any of their children and say, well, there's a good son. Don't know much of anything about their daughters. We say, what about Solomon? That's David's son. Well, if you remember, he's the one that brought back idol worship. His wives in his old age, his heart went after his wives, and he built idols to all the idols of his foreign wives in high places all around in Israel. So, not exactly not a gold star moment for Solomon. He did some great things, but the sin that he brought into Israel stayed with them all the way to Babylon and Syria. So, not great. So you have two, what we would call, or what Israel would call, great kings, but their families suffered. Right? Did some wonderful things. I would argue there's a sermon laying right in there for us, recognizing men who focused on growing the kingdom, pursuing political interests at the expense of raising up faithful children. Now, the family dynamic then is totally different than now, so it's not a great one-to-one translation here, right? Not sure how much involvement these kings had in the lives of their children. Typically, the wives raised their children up to a certain age. When that child was old enough to work, be it a son, that's when dad kind of took over. So, being kings, I don't know how much face time their children had with their king. Again, king's choice as well. So, anyway, a little bit off chapter, but as we're thinking about the consequences of David's sin with Bathsheba, we have a couple of his children so far that have been doozies. Amnon raped his half-sister, Tamar, and now you have Absalom, who is, it's hard to point at anything and say there's something good going on with him. Right? Other than his looks, he's a pretty guy. He's a good-looking guy, no blemish from head to toe, thick hair that weighs 5 pounds when he gets a cut. If that's something to brag about, I guess it is. The struggle is real with David right now. So we're going to leave him here with chapter 15. David is camping in the kingdom that God has anointed him to lead, and his son has taken the throne from him, has subverted his authority. Any thoughts or questions about this chapter before we wrap it up? We'll jump into chapter 16 next week. The storyline just gets more and more intense as we go. It's a really good read. I worked far enough ahead that I keep wanting to teach 16 and 17, but I'm trying to slow myself down. All right, we'll stop right here and we'll pick up in chapter 16 next week. sit on a